Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
People ask, why is it that people are leaving the faith? And not just the faith like the Catholic Church, which is the true faith, but also all the schismatic groups that broke off from it, all the Protestants and everything else. When you look at the state of the modern world and Christianity in general, it's not good, no matter how hard our bishops try to paint things in rosy terminology that we are living in a new springtime. People believe that their church leaders have become politicians, that they go to mass or wherever, or if they're not a Catholic, they go to whatever it is they do on a Sunday, and they're not hearing the gospel. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It's what in public policy we would call a wicked problem, meaning a problem with so many different factors into it that you can't address it really by finding one simple solution. You have to really address this very complex problem with complex solutions. But one of the big drivers of this is the politicization of the faith. And you'll remember that several years ago, Pew Research did a survey of religion in America. They released a new one just a few days ago, and the numbers are bleak, especially for Catholics, but for Christians in general. Several years ago, in the before times of 2019, Pew Research put out a survey showing only 1 in 3 Catholics believe what the church actually teaches about the Eucharist, meaning that 2 in 3 Catholics are material heretics, if not formal heretics. The bishops have done such a terrible job of teaching the faith that we don't know if people actually know what the church teaches about things other than being nice and voting in a way that you're super liberal and morally suspect and probably James Martin type bishop tells you to vote for by implication. But at least most Catholics, it seems, are material heretics because they deny the belief in the real presence of the Eucharist, that the Eucharist is truly Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity, truly present. Catholics, 2 out of 3 of them believe that it's just a symbol. They would be formal heretics and no longer Catholic if they knowingly rejected what the church teaches about the Eucharist. But again, most don't know. That survey has been the subject of intense debate for the past 6 years. This survey result got initially in 2019, the bishops to do 2 things. One, they did a survey themselves. They gave much rosier numbers about the real presence. And when you look at the survey methods, it's suspect at best. But the other thing, and it tells you that they know their own survey wasn't real, they decided to launch this Eucharistic revival where they did processions and weird rock concert-like get-togethers in stadiums and all sorts of things. They spent millions of dollars on this thing with the hope that this would help revive belief in the real presence. Personally, I didn't like what they did it and how they did it, but at least they did something, which is better than what most would do. But to solve this problem, you need your priests on Sunday to stand up at the ambo and teach what the Eucharist is, and teach the hard truth that if you do not believe what the church says the Eucharist is, then do not come up and receive. This would also require, by the way, teaching about the 4 last things and teaching about what happens if you're not in a state of grace and you receive the Eucharist invalidly, which then requires you to teach about sin. You begin to see how big of a problem this is and how there are so many factors just in the lack of belief in the real presence that it's a complex issue by itself to fix. Well, I'm telling you this now because the Pew Research decided that they didn't want to miss out on this debate, so they did another survey, and they put it out just a couple of days ago, and it's about religion, but Christianity broadly in the United States, and the numbers are pretty bad. So Eric Sammons posted this on X. Let me see if I can pull this up here. You see, he posted the following here to X, and it's amazing. It says, according to a recent Pew survey, again from like 2 or 3 days ago, and I'll show you in a second, for every 100 people who enter the Catholic Church in America, 840 leave. Let's say that again. For every 100 people who enter the Catholic Church in America, 840 leave. This is a 1530s Europe level crisis, and Catholics can't put their heads in the sand and pretend everything is awesome. We need a new Catholic Reformation. Now, some people will immediately blanch when he says Catholic Reformation. The term that most people are used to hearing is the Counter-Reformation. He's calling it a Reformation because, as you will see when somebody calls him out on it in the thread, that the actual Reformation was not a Reformation. It was a revolt against Christ. That's what it was. And replacing Catholicism with a man-made religion built on the 5 false premises of Protestantism and all the rest of it. But here, this is like a screenshot right out of their survey. 100 enter the church. 840 leave. And it's amazing. It's amazing, but it's not surprising. Not at all. And that's the Pew survey. They publish this on their website. You can take a look at it if you want to. I'll put a link in my show notes at returntotradition.org. It's from the Pew Research Center, published at the 26th of February. That's 2 days ago. We're not going to go over the whole thing. The thing is gigantic. Here's the part of the executive summary. The 2023-24 Religious Landscape Study and other Pew Research Center polling find that the Christian share of the population after years of decline has been relatively stable since 2019. And the religiously unaffiliated population, after rising rapidly for decades, has leveled off, at least temporarily, at present. 62% of U.S. adults describe themselves as Christian, 40% are Protestant, 19% are Catholic, and 3% are other Christians. 29% are religiously unaffiliated, 5% are atheist, 6% are agnostic, 19% identify as nothing in particular. 7% belong to religions other than Christianity, and it goes into the numbers. Some key measures of religious belief and practice also have held fairly steady in recent years. They found that 44% of U.S. adults say they pray at least once a day. Though down significantly since 2007, this measure has held between 44 and 46% since 2021. 33% say they go to religious service at least once a month. Think about that for a moment in terms of the Sunday obligation. 33% of Christians say they only go to church services of some kind at least once a month. Since 2020, the percentages saying this have consistently hovered in the low 30s. And large majorities of Americans have a spiritual, supernatural outlook. For example, 86% believe people have a soul or spirit in addition to their physical body. 83% believe in God or a universal spirit. 79% believe there's something spiritual beyond the natural world. 70% believe in heaven, hell, or both. But in future years, we may see further decline in the religiousness of American public for several reasons. This is where it gets bad. Young adults are far less religious than older adults. No recent birth cohort has become more religious as it has aged. The stickiness of a religious upbringing seems to be declining. Compared with older people, fewer young adults who had a highly religious upbringing are still highly religious as adults. The stickiness of a non-religious upbringing seems to be rising. Meaning, in plain language, people raised in a religious household, they're not sticking with their religion as much as they used to. People raised in a non-religious household are sticking with their religion or lack thereof more than they used to. That's alarming. This is the third time Pew Research Center has conducted a religious landscape study. The first was conducted in 2007, the second in 2014. Other key findings from the study include 35% of U.S. adults have switched religion since childhood, leading to net gains for the unaffiliated population and net losses for the Christian population. All three major strands of Protestantism have declined in percentage terms since 2007. Evangelical Protestants now make up 23% of U.S. adults, down from 26%. Mainline Protestants account for 11% of U.S. adults, down from 18%. Members of historically black Protestant churches make up 5% of U.S. adults, down from 7%. And it goes on like that. And they don't give you those numbers for the Catholic Church, and I don't know why that is. It breaks it down by gender. Women are more religious than men. We've known that. Just go look at who's sitting in the pews of your typical ordinary form parish. The share of self-described political liberals who identify as Christians has fallen 25% points from 2007, from 62% to 37%. That will shock no one who's paying attention. Among self-described conservatives, Christian share has declined 7 points from 89 to 82%. And it goes on like this. That should surprise exactly nobody. But that tells you that tells you what's at the heart of what's going on. And if you want to know why that's going on, if you want to see why people are leaving the faith, one reason, among many, it is a wicked problem, besides not actually being taught the faith, which is probably the core of the wicked problem, is this. Far too many of our bishops are glorified politicians. Case in point, this story broke, and it's a kind of a head scratcher. Headline from Crux. No plans to see Trump, but new DC prelate just had lengthy call with Biden. And that is Cardinal Robert McElroy. He's not considered Pape Bile by most people, but if he's the one who emerged on the loggia in the next conclave, get on your knees and pray for mercy. Now, he's an American, so his chances of becoming Pope are next to zero, like Cardinal Dolan, thanks be to God. But get on your knees and beg for mercy if he is the one who shows up on the loggia. This is a bizarre story. Why would Cardinal McElroy meet with the former president and say doesn't have any plans to meet with the current? That's weird, especially since he is the Cardinal Archbishop of Washington, D.C., and at least in the post-conciliar era, all of his predecessors going back to the 60s would meet with the president or representative of his. He's saying he has no plans to do that. That's a little weird. Let's go take a look at the article. Moments after stating that he has no present plans to meet with President Donald Trump, emphasizing what he stressed is the intrinsically pastoral and not political role of the Archbishop of Washington. When it suits his political purposes, he'll say that. Cardinal Robert McElroy revealed he recently held a lengthy call with former President Joe Biden. I'm going to Washington as the Archbishop of Washington, which is a pastoral role, McElroy said. That is, my role is the leadership of the Catholic community of Washington and all that brings with it, he said, noting that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is the church's primary government liaison. Fact check, dubious. Yet moments later, McElroy said that he had a lengthy call with President Biden the other day. He didn't reveal what was discussed on the call other than saying that Biden asked about Pope Francis's health and said he's been praying for the pontiff. Some may see the contrast between spurning Trump while chatting casually with Biden as consistent with McElroy's reputation, seen as a close ally of Pope Francis and one of the nation's more progressive prelates. McElroy made the comments at a February 27th news conference, scheduled as his final one as the Bishop of the Diocese of San Diego before he departs for the nation's capital in just a few weeks. McElroy worried out loud about the nation, quote, being turned upside down, but by and large focused on Pope Francis and his time in San Diego while looking ahead to Washington, end quote. If you actually go watch his press conference, you'll see that Cardinal McElroy was saying a lot of political things were aimed at the current administration. And Crux, by the way, is a progressive modernist Catholic outlet. It's run by one of the dioceses, I think Boston, but it's a modernist outlet. It's a little better than America Magazine. They just tend to take a little bit straighter news line than America Magazine. But that's what's going on. And when you see this stuff, because the typical layperson is not a moron, when you see this stuff, you see your bishops being political actors on stage, and then they openly go against the interests of the country, and they openly go against what the church teaches on the hot button issue of the day. What do you think the results are going to be? I've seen in the course of this discussion about Catholic Charities, USAID, and the rest, many Catholics say that that's it, I'm gone. Most others say I'm not giving another dime to the church, that they will tithe in other ways, but they won't give money in any way that gets back to the bishops. Anything like that is a catastrophe of the bishop's own making. Go back to that story about the bishops having their funding cut off by the U.S. State Department, their contracts canceled. They had become so reliant on U.S. dollars that it supplanted and replaced our duty as Catholics to support the work of the church. And they acted like they knew that. They acted like what the laity wanted, which most of the time is simply, please teach the Catholic faith, uphold the Catholic faith, stand up for the truth of the faith in the public square. They act as if the gospel and the needs of the laity were replaced by political needs. And that's why the last person you want to see as Pope is probably McElroy. I'd say Cardinal Supich, but they're basically the same creature. But that's what would happen. Now, thankfully, their chances of becoming Pope are next to zero. And I say that now, and watch what will happen in the next conclave. Cardinal McElroy will step out on the loggia, just because that's just how life seems to work these days. But if you ever want to know why people leave, that's one of the main reasons. And I'll leave you with this, to borrow a line from Jon Stewart back when he was marginally funny about 30% of the time. Taylor Marshall posted this on X as your exhibit for why people leave. How is this a Catholic priest? And this is James Martin saying, dear friends, I'm happy to share with you a new painting of Bishop Mary Ann Budd, by my friend, the Catholic priest and artist, Father William Hart McNichols, as well as reflection on his new image. If you don't remember who that is, right after taking the oath of office, there was a thing at the National Cathedral, which is an Episcopalian cathedral. She is the, quote, bishop of the Episcopalian cathedral, and she lectured him and J.D. Vance to their face about all the hot button issues of the day during her homily. Bishop. Utterly null and void holy orders for a whole lot of reasons, including the most obvious one right in front of your face. This is Pastor Jimmy Martin of the Jesuit Church promoting her. Church has ruled explicitly over and over again on ordaining the ladies, how it's not possible, and has explicitly said Anglican holy orders are null and void. And you know who took that very seriously? The Anglicans did. Anglican bishops and priests quietly went out and found schismatic groups with valid holy orders to get their ordinations taken care of. But of course, she's not a bishop. She calls herself bishop, but she's not one. And there's Pastor Jimmy Martin celebrating it for political reasons, not for any legitimate reason. All right, folks. I'm curious what you think about this in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. And remember, please pray for the church, because men like McElroy, regardless of how everything plays out the next few weeks, men like McElroy will continue to have enormous influence for a very long time. And just pray that maybe if we get a new pope soon, that he is a pope who will give us better shepherds than men like McElroy and Supich and the rest. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.